When you hear the word food, what actually pops into your head? Like, really think about it for a second. Is it a super colorful supermarket aisle, maybe a convenient drive-through menu, or, a brightly packaged snack? Well, before we really get going today, I want to throw this pretty bold question your way. Because honestly, by the end of this, I want you to completely rethink your fundamental definition of what it actually means to eat.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am so incredibly excited about this one. Today, we're extracting some truly fascinating insights straight from Mihaela Telekin's book, Make Peace with Fat. We are literally going to rewire our whole nutritional paradigm by looking at how ancestral diets actually define food. We're moving way past that simple math of just, counting calories, and we're going to look at the deeply rooted biological instructions we're sending our bodies every single day.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for today. Number 1, what actually is food? 2, the ancestral blueprint. 3, food is genetic information. 4, hormones, the master switches. And finally, number 5, why fat actually burns fat. All right, let's dive right in. So, starting off with part 1, what actually is food? Redefining our daily intake. To really wrap our heads around this, I'm going to need you to completely forget the modern supermarket for a second and take a little trip back in time with me.
To kind of break us out of all this modern nutritional confusion, Telekin gives us some very specific, pretty stringent rules to sort out what real food actually is. First off, would your great-grandparents from, say, 200 or 300 years ago even recognize it as edible? Second, if it happens to come in a package, it should really only have 1 to 3 pronounceable ingredients, tops. Third, it absolutely must be whole and unprocessed, and crucially, it needs to mimic what our ancient ancestors ate. So the big takeaway here? We simply shouldn't allow the modern food industry to run chemistry experiments on our bodies. Seriously, if you need a biochemistry degree just to pronounce the label, it's a science experiment. It's not food.
All right, moving on to part 2, the ancestral blueprint, eating like humans of the Great Rift Valley. Let's see how our deep evolutionary history literally shaped what our bodies are expecting us to consume on a daily basis. And this timeline brilliantly illustrates the vast stretch of human history. For roughly 195,000 years, Homo sapiens thrived in places like the Great Rift Valley in Africa. They survived by hunting and foraging, right? Eating wild game, fish, organ meats, and seasonal low-starch plants. They didn't have agriculture at all. It actually wasn't until about 10,000 years ago that farming introduced grains and legumes to the human diet. And our present day, well, that is just a tiny, microscopic, yet honestly incredibly disruptive blip of highly processed, carb-heavy diets. Our hard biological hardware, the actual machinery of our bodies, was forged in that 195,000-year window. It definitely wasn't forged in the drive-through line. Which brings us to part 3, food is genetic information. The software of our bodies. We are totally shifting the paradigm right now because viewing food as just, calories in, calories out is a dangerously incomplete way to understand human metabolism.
This is where the absolutely fascinating science of epigenetics comes into play. Epigenetics is essentially the study of how environmental factors, and specifically the food we eat, override and change the way our inherited genes are expressed. Kind of think of your inherited genetics as ancient biological hardware. It's fixed, right? You can't change it. But the food you eat, that is the software code that actually programs your health. It sits right on top of your genes and literally tells them what to do. So you are quite literally writing the script of your life and health with every single bite you take.
Telekin sums this whole concept up with this incredibly powerful quote. Genes are loading the gun, but you, through your choices, pull the trigger. And honestly, this should be super empowering. Even if you have a family history that predisposes you to a metabolic disorder like diabetes, for example, having the gene doesn't guarantee you're going to get the disease. The gun is loaded, yes, but your environment and primarily that daily software code of your dietary choices is what actually pulls the trigger.
All right, let's move on to part 4, hormones, the master switches, the shift workers of the pancreas. We're going to look at how this biological machinery actually processes our genetic food code. So I want you to meet the shift workers of your pancreas. On one side, we've got insulin, which is the master storage hormone, and on the other, we have glucagon, the master mobilization hormone. I call them shift workers because they don't work at the same time. Insulin is kind of like this overzealous storage manager. In Paleolithic times, when food was scarce and famines were super common, insulin's incredible ability to just store energy literally saved our species. But in our modern era of endless feasts, this relentless storing, it totally works against us. Glucagon, on the flip side, does the exact opposite. It mobilizes and frees up that stored energy right when we need it. Now, what is really truly fascinating is how our bodies react to different macronutrients. Let's look at the calories first, right? Carbohydrates and protein both have 4 calories per gram. Fat has more than double that, at 9 calories per gram. But guys, the hormonal response is everything. Carbs aggressively spike your insulin. Protein mostly stimulates glucagon, with just a tiny, mild insulin response. But fat is hormonally neutral. It does not trigger insulin or glucagon. And this pretty much completely proves that all calories are simply not created equal because their hormonal fates inside our bodies are entirely different.
So, the really crucial point here is understanding where that spiked insulin actually puts the energy from the carbs we eat. Think of it like we have 2 main storage tanks. Our glycogen tank, which stores carbohydrates in our liver and muscles, is really tiny. It holds only about 2,000 calories. But our adipose tissue, our fat storage, that is a virtually limitless vault. It can easily hold over 40,000 calories, and that's even in a really lean person. So when we eat a modern, carb-heavy diet, our tiny 2,000-calorie glycogen tank fills up almost instantly. And what does our storage manager, insulin, do? Well, it's forced to shove all those excess modern carbs straight into our limitless fat storage.
And that leads us directly into part 5, why fat burns fat, returning to the ancestral metabolism. Let's see how all this builds into returning to our true biological baseline. Because fat is hormonally neutral, like we talked about, it doesn't trigger insulin. Therefore, consuming a diet where fat is your primary energy source essentially tricks your body into the exact same metabolic state as fasting. Just think about it for a second. When you don't spike your insulin with carbohydrates, your body stops trying to store energy. That overzealous storage manager basically takes the day off, and your body starts actively hunting for stored energy to burn instead.
And that lack of insulin, it unlocks this magnificent process called beta oxidation. This is the mitochondrial process in the liver where mobilized fat is converted into ketone bodies for energy. Because you aren't providing that quick, easy carbohydrate energy, your body finally taps into that massive 40,000-calorie vault. It breaks down your stored fat and turns it right into ketones, fueling your brain and your body exactly like it did for our hunter-gatherer ancestors during those lean times.
Which brings us to the ultimate grand metabolic punchline of this explainer. Eat fat to burn fat. Eat carbs to store fat. And eat fat plus carbs to store fat. The human body simply cannot burn both substrates at the exact same time. If you mix modern carbs with fats, let's say eating bread and butter together, your insulin immediately spikes from the bread and your body instantly defaults to storage mode. It stores the carbs and it stores the fat. So to burn fat, you literally have to stop mixing them. Swap the bread for broccoli, keep the butter, and return to that hormonally neutral ancestral state.
So I really want to leave you with this provocative question to think about before you sit down for your very next meal. Are you feeding your body the optimal code it evolved to run on, or are you running a modern virus? Your genetics, they haven't changed in 195,000 years, but your software choices, those happen every single day. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today. I really hope this empowers you to completely rethink the biological software on your plate.